Hello, my name is David Duong, and I am a volunteer with CPA Canada's Financial Literacy. Thank you for attending today's estate planning session. I'm very excited to be presenting this session because it's a very important topic. We surveyed people on the topic of having a will, and not surprisingly, barely half the people in Canada have a will done. So that's why it's very important for everyone here today to listen up and start planning for their estate. First, we're going to talk what is estate planning, right? Next, the process of estate planning. I think that's very important. We'll also share with you some tools and strategies to consider, as well as ideas on your will, getting it done. We'll share some helpful resources for you, and we'll leave some time at the end of the presentation as well for some questions and answers. What is estate planning? Well, it's the process of creating a plan to distribute your assets during your lifetime or upon your death. It's really taking care of the people that's important to you. And it's more than that as well. I mean, you need to take care of the contingencies. What happens if something were to happen that's outside of your control? Do you have a plan in place to deal with those issues? So why do you want to do estate planning? Well, it's really making sure that your dependents and your beneficiaries have the income and assets should you not be there. You know, how are their lifestyle and their current lifestyle going to be maintained if you're not around to take care of them? You know, if one person's income is now gone, how do you make sure that your lifestyle, that your spouse or your common law partner, for example, and your children are still going to be maintained, i.e. going to school, etc., right? Next is avoiding and minimizing family disputes, right? As you know, there's a lot of litigation and issues that come up in terms of with children too, and guardianship. And all kinds of things come out of the woodwork when there's not enough communication that's in place. So, you know, you can minimize a lot of your disputes, right? So it's really about conveying your wishes about how your affairs are to be administered, right? We want to make sure that at the end of the day, your costs are minimized, right? Your taxes. People may not be aware that when someone passes away, estate taxes can be the largest bill that you'll be paying. So all in all, it's really about having a peace of mind so that you and your family can still go on living when you're not here. So next, we're going to talk about the estate planning process. So step one is really determining your objectives. And what does that mean? Have you really had a sit-down conversation with your family yet to understand exactly and let everyone know exactly what your goals are in terms of your estate plans? Next is understanding your current financial status. And what that entails is, do you know your assets as well as your debts? Because often when people think about estate planning, they usually think about their assets. However, unfortunately, when people pass away, there's also a lot of debts that needs to be settled, i.e. taxes as well. Third is consider some tools and strategies, which we'll talk about a little bit later on in this presentation, such as trusts, such as adding someone else to your property or assets as an example. And then developing a plan in place. We all need to have a plan so that we know where we want to go and how to get there. And then implementing a plan with advice. You can either do it yourself or get a professional to do it for you. And also keeping your plan current. So what does that mean? Well, if something happens, a life event, you get married, get divorced, all we suggest is maybe every 3 to 5 years, you review your plan. And if need be, go revisit and change your will as an example, or power of attorney. So these are the tools and strategies that we'll be covering. Your power of attorney, what does that entail? Your will, what is a will? Joint accounts, gifting, what's a trust? And also life insurance as an estate planning tool and strategy, which people don't think about actually most of the time. I'd like to talk about what is a power of attorney. So a power of attorney is a legal document that allows someone to act on your behalf, just as if they were you. Can it be someone that you trust? Could it be a family member? Sure. Could it be a lawyer? Could it be your accountant? Yes. It's really ultimately up to you to decide, okay? One important distinction between a power of attorney and a will is that a power of attorney is good when someone is alive versus a will only takes effect when someone passes away. Okay? Now each province has their own legislation in terms of power of attorney, so we encourage you to check with your province's government to make sure that you're getting the right information. Okay? And also, power of attorneys do not have the power to give away property. I just want to clarify that. Versus someone who is an executor of the estate, they have the power to act on your behalf according to the instructions that you have in your will. Okay, so when does a power of attorney come in handy? Well, it could be for a specific period of time. It could be for a specific situation. It could be when you become incapacitated. A POA, let's call it, can also cover specific general situations as well. And it could take for an indefinite period of time, or it could be only for a specific 2 or 3 month period, i.e. you go on vacation, as an example. So those are the reasons why you would really consider doing a POA and a will at the same time. So a specific power of attorney gives a person a right for a specific purpose, i.e. sell a piece of property like your cottage, as an example. So furthermore, there are 2 types of POAs. One for your property, so you can put an individual who is financially capable of doing so. And what that means is that they have to have the competence to be able to a power of attorney. It's not necessarily someone that you think is a nice person. They may or may not be nice, but it's very important that they have the knowledge and capability to do that. The other portion, the other type of POA is what we call the healthcare decisions, i.e. a living will. And that allows someone to make decisions such as pulling life support. Next, I want to talk about a term called dying intestate, which some of you may or may not have heard before. And what that really means is you're dying without a will. So what are the ramifications of that? Well, if you don't have a will, the government will have a will for you. Did you know that? So for example, in Ontario, if you die intestate, there's a preset formula. So an example would be you have an estate worth $800,000. The first $200,000 would go to your spouse or common law partner. Anything above that, you're sharing 1/3 with your children. Is that what you want in your will? Likely not. Next is that you have no say on who gets your assets if you die without a will, right? You're not able to influence who is going to look after your children. Would you like a public guardian to be appointed to raise your children and their financial affairs, right? Some people, I think, would rather have control over that than the government. And also taxes as well, which can be a whole new other session, but it's also very important to have a will done, because if you don't have one, there is a huge tax consequence for not having a will. In other words, you're really leaving your life's work to the government to decide. Most people, given the opportunity, would rather have control over how things get divvied up and also doing the right thing for their beneficiaries and the people they care about. So let's talk about making a will. The first point here talks about determining where your property will go to after your debts are paid. And that really means talking to a lawyer, getting get a legal opinion, get someone to draft your intentions correctly according to the law. I know people do download templates themselves. There are risks involved, so you really have to weigh the pros and cons of that. And also having a lawyer done can also be a cost-effective way to have things divided equally, right? Getting a second professional legal opinion from someone who's in this industry is definitely helpful for most people when it comes to estate planning, because you don't know what you don't know, right? Second, remember to update your will every 3 to 5 years, and that doesn't mean seeing your lawyer every 3 to 5 years. It really means that if you have a life event, that you revisit your plans, and if it does require changing, if it doesn't, great. But you know where things stand, and also your loved ones knows where things stand as well. And the third one is that without a will, we really want to emphasize this, is that your property will be divided according to the government formula that we just talked about. And then that's something that people aren't aware of. And by that time, it may be too late. And there's another point that I really want to make sure everyone is aware of, is that you want to make sure that your will is witnessed, right? And also making sure that your family is fully aware of what your intentions are. Communicating with them prior to drafting a will so that there aren't any issues down the road. So next I want to talk about what is an executor or executrix. And those terms can be used interchangeably. And what those terms mean is that the person that you designate to be responsible for your will and executing what you've said in your will, they are the executor or executrix. Okay? So usually you have one primary person that you designate as an executor and also have a backup for that person, because that person may or may not want that job down the road. Okay? And I do say job for a reason, and it's on purpose, because estates don't settle 3-6 months. I've seen it where it settles 3 years. So can you imagine? This is a 3-year job. Okay? So you want to make sure that you have an open and honest discussion with this person that you plan to designate as an executor. It's not an honorary position. They need to be competent, so it doesn't have to be someone in your family. They definitely need to be trustworthy and knowledgeable, and you have to get their consent beforehand, right? Nothing worse than someone passing away and all of a sudden someone finds out that they've been named the executor or executrix of an estate, okay? And I've seen that happen. By the way, the executor is not bound to this job. They can refuse. They can definitely charge a fee if they want as well, but they don't have to take a fee. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that needs to be put into careful thought when it comes to this topic. So here's a perfect time for you to pause and ask the audience if they have any questions and quiz them on something that you've already discussed. For example, the will. So did you know when a person dies, the Canada Revenue Agency considers that person has disposed all of the capital property right before death at fair market value, unless the property is transferred to their spouse. Also, your capital property can include a lot of types of investments, such as stocks, bonds, real estate, mutual funds, your cottage, your house. All of these are considered capital property under the Canada Revenue Agency's eyes. And also, your capital property, if it's appreciated in value over time, which typically it has in Canada, you'll also need to pay significant taxes as well. So you need to have a plan in place so that you can reduce the taxes for your beneficiaries' sake. So listen up, dying can be very expensive. There are a lot of costs involved, and I want to go over some of them with you right now. Administration expenses, funeral expenses, payment of your outstanding debts, your personal income taxes, the maintenance and welfare expenses of the people that you care about, your family, as well as specific cash bequests, and also probate taxes. So I want to go over what probate means at this point as well. So probate is the legal process of validating someone's will. So in Ontario, you have to pay a certain percentage of your net assets, of your value of your estates, in order to have it probated. Probate also is generally involved when someone dies intestate. Banks, most financial institutions will require a will to be probated in order for them to release your assets, as an example. And Quebec is the only province that doesn't require probate. So we would always encourage everyone to check with their province to make sure that they understand the appropriate rules and laws of that province that they pass away in. So there are ways for most people to reduce their probate taxes, whether it's joint accounts, trust, life insurance, adding someone's name to an account. Those are all different ways that you can consider to help you with reducing your probate taxes. And now we're going to talk about joint accounts. Our next slide is on joint ownership, and what that entails is registering the assets under multiple owners. Usually it's the simplest way, and that's by joint tenancy with right of survivorship. That's what it means when you add someone to your property. So when one person passes away, the ownership is automatically passed on to the other person who's on title. And next is, the pros of that is it's useful for avoiding probate. But other than tax, there's also legal issues that you have to consider as well that can arise. Next is you must be comfortable with the other individual having access now to your assets, because you are giving it away. You have to, when you're adding someone to the asset, right? And lastly, if you're in the province of Quebec, unfortunately or fortunately, you cannot use it, okay? Before I leave this slide, I also want to mention is that joint account and joint ownership of any property can have a lot of complex issues involved. So you want to make sure you understand all the pros and cons before you jump into this strategy. The next slide I want to talk about is gifting. So gifting assets before someone passes away. It's the easiest way to transfer your assets is to give them away while you're alive. While gifting to a charitable cause can also lead to tax benefits, other gifting can also create tax liabilities. So definitely you can give cash away to your adult children, which won't have any tax consequences. Keep in mind though, if you're gifting assets to your children or your spouse, there are some attribution rules. What that means is that even though you've given it to them, the tax on the first generation income, which I'll discuss in a little bit what that is, will be attributed back to you as if it's you who's earning that interest, for example, okay? And also, don't be careful about what you're giving away. Don't give away too much. People are living a lot longer now. How do you feel about asking your children for money when you've given it away? This is the perfect point where you can start to ask people on what I just mentioned, first generation income. Ask them if they understand what that is. Explain to them, because most people outside from us accountants, CPAs, may not know what that is about, what that means. So it's very important in this point to ask them and clarify that before you move on. So next tool I want to talk to everyone about is a trust. So let's talk about what is a trust. A trust is a legal entity. So a trust is a legal entity as if it's a legal person. So they actually pay taxes as a legal person would. A trust can be created while you're alive, meaning inter vivos. You may have heard that term before. Or a trust can be created when someone passes away through a will, which is called a testamentary trust. Okay? So once you transfer your assets into a trust, the trust becomes the legal owner of the asset. And you have a trustee who is in charge of running the trust on your behalf. Okay? So very similar to an executor and a will, you have a trustee of a trust. Okay? Part of the trustee's responsibility here is to distribute the income and assets of the trust and also file all the income taxes as well. So one of the common questions people ask is, well, how much does my estate really have to be in order for me to really consider? And we recommend for you to even really consider, it should be between $150,000 to $200,000 at least before you can even consider, because it's very timely and costly to establish a trust. So how the assets and the trust are distributed and managed are entirely up to you when you set up the trust. So what are the benefits of a trust? Well, the first benefit is you can manage your assets on behalf of your minor children, right, who are maybe physically or mentally impaired. And that's very important. Second is you can control your assets without owning them. So when you gift assets to a trust, you are no longer legally the owner. The person putting the assets into a trust is what we call a settlor. Even though you put your assets into the trust, the settlor still has control over the trust. Third is shield assets from creditors. So for those who are business owners, perhaps, you can shield your assets from your creditors. If, heaven forbid, you close up shop, your business goes under. Fourth is possibility to reduce taxes. So I just want to add something extra to point number 4. Probate, as you know, is a form of tax. And having a trust avoids probate, because with probating a will, you have to list all the assets and how much it's worth in a will. While having everything in a trust, you no longer have to do that. And the last one is privacy. A trust is very private. No one can see what is in a trust indenture versus a will. A will, you pay a little fee, and you can actually see how what are the assets that are listed in the probated will. So if you happen to mention certain terms that you think are not as commonly used, because, for example, I just used trust indenture. It's probably a good time for you to clarify that with the audience, just to make sure that they know what that means. So life insurance. Now, before I start with this, it's not intended to be a life insurance session. However, it is one of the tools that people should consider in terms of their estate planning needs. Life insurance, there are 2 points that I like to talk about. First one is life insurance is an effective way to transfer wealth tax-free from a parent to a child or grandchild. Interesting financial fact, life insurance proceeds are paid tax-free to your named beneficiaries or your beneficiary. So the second point on life insurance that we'd like to share with you is that life insurance proceeds typically can be used for the following purposes: to maintain the lifestyle of your dependents, for example, your wife and children in their home, making sure that your children are still going to be able to go to the school, university or college or program that you intended him or her to go to. It could go used to pay funeral expenses and related expenses, as well as paying estate income taxes as well. There's another interesting financial fact is that there's something called critical illness, and that's used in the unlikely event that, heaven forbid, someone has a stroke or a heart attack or cancer even. And as we all know, it can be very costly for people to get the care that they want. And this is another way for you to ensure that your lifestyle doesn't drastically change because of this life event. People can purchase critical illness either before or after they purchase life insurance as well. So next, I'd like to summarize some of the key ideas that we talked about today. We talked about what a power of attorney is, and consider drafting up a power of attorney, at the same time maintaining or updating a will or creating a will if you haven't done so already. And we talked about what an executor or an executrix is. Also having a good estate plan and how that can benefit you and your family to avoid taxes or minimize taxes. And making sure that probate fees are also taken into account in your estate planning needs. So lastly, I want to leave some tools and resources that you can definitely look into. We covered a lot, so I hope this will give you the impetus to do some more research on your behalf and especially on your family's behalf. Feel free to reach out to our CPA link that I provided here. While it's possible for everyone to do their will themselves, we strongly suggest that you seek out professional advice to get it done. This is the point where you open up the floor to questions and answers. It's also a good time to let all the audience know that you'll be staying around for a few more minutes so that they can ask some of the questions that you may or may not have been able to answer during the presentation. And also make sure you thank them for taking the time to come. And maybe it's a good time for you also to talk about other future seminars and topics that they might be interested in as well. So this concludes our presentation. I just want to say thank you everyone for taking the time to come out and share some of your experiences also during the whole presentation with us. I think everyone here really appreciate everyone's input. I definitely hope that you found some value in this presentation and hope to see you all again at another CPA session in the future.